Michigan has hundreds of forgotten lakes, but only one is called Deadman Lake, and the reason why is darker than most people realize. In the 1870s, central Michigan was exploding with growth. Railroads carved through dense forests, logging camps appeared almost overnight, and rough frontier towns followed the tracks. Farwell, Michigan was one of them. The Flint and Pear Marquette Railroad brought workers, gamblers, drifters, and trouble. Winters here were brutal. Snow swallowed the roads, temperatures dropped below zero, and if you were stranded in the woods at night, you might never make it home. On the night of January 7th, 1877, Owen Feeney boarded a westbound train. He was intoxicated, disruptive, and sometime after 7 o'clock that evening, he was kicked off the train in Farwell. Feeney still needed to reach Chippewa Station, 11 miles away, so he began walking west along the railroad grade, alone, in the freezing darkness. He never arrived. Then, in September of 1877, the unnamed lake, now known as Deadman Lake, gave up its secret. Henry Daggett and his son were fishing from a canoe when they spotted something floating near the south end of the lake. It was Owen Feeney. His body had drifted to the surface after nearly 9 months underwater. A justice of the peace hurried to the scene, along with 6 local men acting as jurors for the inquest. What they discovered shocked them. According to the official findings, Feeney's throat had been cut. This wasn't an accident. It was murder. Exactly 1 year after Feeney disappeared, January 8th, 1878, charges were filed against 2 local men, Joseph W. Andre and Joseph McCain. The legal case became known as People versus Joseph W. Andre and Joseph McCain, but the prosecution struggled almost immediately. The charge against Andre was dismissed after preliminary examination, and later, the case against McCain also collapsed. Officials claimed there simply wasn't enough evidence. No murder weapon, no eyewitness, no confession. The case went cold, and the lake without a name became known forever as Deadman Lake. Then came the strangest twist of all. 23 years later, Christmas night, 1900. A man named Henry Green walked into a police station in Sacramento, California, and confessed. He claimed he murdered Bill Feeney at Deadman Lake. Imagine hearing that confession. A murder from Michigan, more than 2 decades old, suddenly solved. Except Henry Green soon took it all back. He said he had been under the influence of cocaine, without a written confession. Michigan officials refused to pay the cost to extradite him, and just like that, Deadman Lake returned to mystery. To understand stories like Deadman Lake, you have to understand what northern Michigan lumber towns were really like, and a few places had a darker reputation than Harrison, Michigan. In the late 1870s and early 1880s, Harrison was called Michigan's toughest town. At its peak, the rough lumber town held around 2,000 people, but despite its small size, Harrison had 22 saloons, 12 restaurants, 5 hotels, and endless waves of lumberjacks pouring through town. Violence was common, drinking was constant, and legends were born almost nightly. Among the town's most feared men were Silver Jack and Mike McGovern, massive fighters who reportedly weighed nearly 300 pounds each. Locals claimed they could knock down a horse with one punch. Then there was T.C. Cunyon, known as the Man-Eater from Peterborough. His favorite bar trick? Biting chunks out of beer mugs. Another local character named Dry as Ford became famous for his skill with a black snake whip. He could supposedly flick ash from a cigar with a single crack, and nearly every old town had its nuisance. In Harrison, that was Old Shuts. But perhaps the most dangerous fighter in town was Cranky Dean, a man remembered as the roughest brawler in Harrison history. Yet even these men were overshadowed by the town's most infamous couple, Jim Carr and his wife Maggie. Jim and Maggie Carr operated a combination saloon, dance hall, and hotel high above Harrison. The location later became known as Tank Hill, but in the early 1900s, locals called it something else, Deadman's Hill. According to legend, men disappeared there. Stories claim Jim Carr secretly buried victims on the slopes below his saloon. Carr allegedly robbed lumberjacks, ran gambling operations, and trafficked in nearly every vice imaginable. Then, in 1885, Jim Carr was convicted of killing a man named Frankie Osborne with a pair of brass knuckles. He was sentenced to 15 years in Jackson Prison. But later, a new trial was granted, and Carr walked free. Over time, his fortune collapsed. Some claimed he once possessed $75,000. By the end of his life, he reportedly had almost nothing. One story even claims Carr built an entire resort on runners so it could quickly be moved across county lines if authorities arrived. But perhaps the strangest part of the legend came after his death. 7 ministers reportedly refused to officiate at Jim Carr's funeral. So instead, more than 500 lumberjacks held their own procession. To this day, locals say Carr lies in an unmarked grave near Meredith Cemetery, buried outside the cemetery grounds because citizens refused to let him rest among the dead. And then there's the Surrey House, one of Harrison's most famous historic buildings. The structure appears to date back to around 1880. Originally operated as the Johnson House, then Ohio Tavern, named so because many of the guests came from Ohio. It was later changed to the Lockwood Hotel, and finally the Surrey House in 1946. It is now the town's new district library. Old records suggest it functioned as both a hotel and tavern, complete with an adjoining livery stable. And judging by surviving records, peace and quiet were rare. Recently discovered paperwork found hidden inside the walls showed repeated expenses for replacing windows and plate glass, which strongly suggests the tavern saw its fair share of violent nights. Some paranormal investigators believe the Surrey House may still carry echoes from Harrison's rough lumber era. Visitors have reported unexplained footsteps, voices in empty rooms, shadow figures, cold spots, and strange feelings on the upper floors late at night. Claims of a girl have been seen upstairs. Considering the town's brutal history, many locals wonder whether some of Harrison's darkest characters never truly left. Today, Deadman Lake still exists, quiet, remote, easy to miss. But locals have shared stories for generations. Some claim strange sounds echo across the water late at night. Others describe sudden cold spots, or the feeling of being watched near the shoreline. And according to local legend, on winter nights when the fog rolls across the lake, people have seen a lone figure walking near the old railroad grade, searching for something, or someone. More than a century later, Deadman Lake still keeps its secrets. Who killed Owen Feeney? Why was he murdered? And was Henry Green telling the truth? Maybe somewhere beneath the stories, rumors, and legends, the answer still waits, buried under the ice. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe for more interesting tales of paranormal and history. We'll be covering more ghostly tales of Harrison, Michigan, and many other places, some long ago abandoned.